Like many video game communities, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has its split between its casual and competitive audience. Some enjoy their fun strategies or their connections to the television show, while others want to win whatever it takes.
Destroy a card in the deck, but yeah, he's cards in your. It's about to get locked out. He's monsters.
And look, these two communities argue over everything. They have completely different wants from out of the game. In 2022, though, there was something the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Community could truly get behind. Ban Mystic Mine. Mystic Mine would be a card that would be so incredibly toxic to Yu-Gi-Oh! It would define the game for a full-on year. While Mystic Mine is on the field, the player with the most monsters can't attack or can't activate monster effects. So big surprise in a card game all about monsters. Yeah, Mystic Mine is pretty good. Nice enough for Mystic Mine, it does destroy itself when both monster counts are equal at the end of the turn. The problem with this, however, is it just creates these little mini games where one player is trying to remove all the monsters on his field. And so, yeah, on paper, this card's pretty toxic. But Mystic Mine would be a card that would go through development, go through generations, from being a gimmicky win condition to decking people out to being the format-defining card in 2022. This is the competitive story of Mystic Mine. Mystic Mine's humble beginnings starts in Dark Neostorm. On January 12, 2019, Dark Neostorm released to store shelves in Japan and the Asian market. The dynamic in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that Japan typically gets their sets 3 to 4 months earlier before the rest of the West does. So here in America, Europe, Australia, and wherever else the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG is, we get to see what happens in Asia to try and see, what cards are gonna be good. The most prevalent cards out of Dark Neostorm were the Orcust cards, which would make this deck's popularity skyrocket in terms of meta viability. And soon Orcust would fit itself into a 4-deck format, known as Toss: Thunder Dragon, Orcust, Sky Striker, and Salamangreat. And throughout the next couple months of Dark Neostorm's format, these 4 decks would reign supreme over Asia, and the TCG would watch. However, there was something going on in the OCG with this card called Mystic Mine.
No. Wait. At release, Mine was seen as the central component in this strange, tiered but largely unexplored control deck that was just sort of difficult for individuals to get a grasp on because it required not only playing cards that truly individuals had never heard of, but also required understanding game states and advantages in a way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Does not train you. And it's unfortunately just a couple of months after Darkness Neostorm released, I believe with Mine, Mystic Mine Burn as a strategy was born.
3 Extravagance, 3 Demise, and 3 Duality. After that are 3...
And such was the evolution of Mystic Mine stun decks. Now, a stun deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the complete antithesis of a card game. The whole point is to stop your opponent from playing the game and you basically doing nothing. The whole point of this Mystic Mine deck was to stun your opponent, stop them from playing the game, and then resolve a bunch of trap cards that inflict damage to your opponent over the course of the game. While, of course, if your opponent just has the out to Mystic Mine, that being a card that can remove it from the field, allowing them to then play, well, the strategy would kind of just go in the tank. While a lot of people find a lot of enjoyment flipping a bunch of floodgates against their opponent and watching them, get a little angry, Mystic Mine Burn would become a deck that could cheese out a couple of wins. So in May, when Dark Neostorm finally released, Mystic Mine as a win condition as its own deck was seen as just a bit of a gimmick. But there were murmurs about Mystic Mine as a card being theoretically absolutely insane versus the now very powerful Danger Thunder Dragon deck. The reason being is that Danger Thunder Dragon runs nearly no spell cards. They are a deck sometimes consisting of 37 monsters and 3 copies of a draw card called Sekka's Light, which reads you can't activate spell cards for the rest of the duel. And with most of the removal cards for Mystic Mine being spell cards, well, you can kind of see how things can go off the rails when Thunder Dragon faces a Mystic Mine. So a card like Mystic Mine that strictly targets monsters only all of a sudden becomes unbeatable against this deck. So theoretically, you just slap Mystic Mine on the field and, well, your deck doesn't run these burn trap cards though if you're not playing the Mystic Mine burn deck. So eventually you're gonna have to try and like break the board and play the game, right? Enter Yu-Gi-Oh's alternate win condition. Deck out.
Make a difference if you, the player, are not allowed to take certain actions.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll pass 6 cards.
Draw face, down by face, ring face.
And here's the thing, like there's no way to...
He's wasting a little bit of time. He's not going to have an out and concedes game 1.
Absolutely nothing he could do after that.
So how these Mystic Mine strategies would work is typically Thunder Dragon would assemble a full combo, a bunch of different negates and whatever on their first turn. Your goal, as someone who has Mystic Mine in their grip, is going to bait out these negates in sequence and then drop Mystic Mine on the field. Alright, your Thunder Dragon opponent can no longer out this card. So what happens next? Well, in theory, since your Thunder Dragon opponent cannot get rid of Mystic Mine or alter the number of monster counts to equal yours, which theoretically is 0, they would go ahead and pass turn right back to you. You, seeing that your opponent has no out, passes right back to them. Your Thunder Dragon opponent draws for turn. We're going to do this like 20 to 30 more times. And as the Thunder Dragon opponent attempts to draw with no more cards remaining in his deck, he loses the game via deck out. But that was all theory. Would it actually work?
YCS before that point, or before the WCQ with the set legal, that was Knoxville. And
You may or may not have won.
yeah, we knew about Mystic Mine for that. And my testing group, we wanted to intentionally play a deck that didn't have anything crazy new in it, any new innovations really, because we wanted to save stuff for the points playoff and for the WCQ. We wanted to do it at Worlds. That's the keeping our eye on the prize. And we expected many of the better players to do the same. So I assumed a lot of the better players would not play Mystic Mine outside of the usual context, because the usual context in OCG was it was used for Mystic Mine burn decks. But many of the better players here obviously knew that. The thing is though, some people did top Knoxville with these Mystic Mine and their like Orcus deck, for example. I don't remember who did, but I'm pretty sure there were a couple people who did. And it kind of was like a damn, because the kind of cat's out of the bag. You don't have to play this in a stall deck. You can play it in pretty much anything. And it meant for WCQ format, you'd be an idiot if you didn't have an out to Mystic Mine like at any kind of corner.
So on June 21st, almost a month after YCS Knoxville and the day before the main event of the NAWCQ, there is the World's Points Playoff. This tournament includes the top 32 circuit points leaders. They then engage in a brutal single elimination bracket where the top 2 finishers qualify for the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship. And so fresh off of his YCS win, Jesse Cotton again would uncork a card that was seen as just a gimmick and turn it into a win condition.
I really liked my my striker deck. I almost consider like my magnum opus. Whenever we're building a deck, you want to look for the flaws of the deck and then try and solve the problems. And every single problem I encountered, I worked my ass off to try and find a solution. And I feel like I did for that deck. I found solutions to Black Garden, which was the one that I was worried was Sky Striker, right? Because people were playing these field spell engines, and they'd have Mystic Mine for these Thunder decks, and then it'd say, okay, well, if we're versus Striker, let's put Black Garden in and then give them tokens. So my logic was, okay, we can lean into beating these now really aggro combo decks with Trap Trick, Metaverse, Mystic Mine, but now we can turn the Trap Tricks into Sanctums and some of the Scythe, and when they give us the tokens they gave us will now kill them because they can't play anymore. They have to pass, give with 4 tokens on my field, and then they die. So that's like one solution we came up with. Like, how do we win the mirror match now with so many cards not like kind of geared towards the mirror? And Utopia Double was a surprise factor there. So it was a whole kind of a string of things together.
Sky Strikers have a lot of inherent synergy with Mystic Mine. Sky Strikers are a control deck that only really need to use one monster at a time. So theoretically, you could play underneath your own Mystic Mine, as well as you can shut off your own Mystic Mine by activating another field spell right on top of it. Jesse Cotton rolled up to the World's Points playoffs and played a total of 10 ways to fetch Mystic Mine from his deck. 3 copies of Trap Trick, 3 copies of Metaverse, 3 copies of Mystic Mine, and 2 Terraforming. Wait, that's 11. He also played a very funny tech called Double or Nothing. It allows you to make a monster that can attack for 10,000 damage. So if your opponent's locked underneath Mystic Mine, you just attack with a monster that has less than 2,000 attack and hit them for 8,000 damage through their own card. And so with this absolutely obscene concoction, Jesse Cotton would place in the top 2 and qualify for the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship. But now we go into a bit of a conundrum. Mystic Mine, as many other format warping cards, go through this sort of vicious cycle. When the card is good, people prepare for it, and therefore the card is bad. And then when people don't prepare for it because the card is theoretically bad, then the card becomes good. However, there were certain decks in this format that just simply couldn't play the outs to Mystic Mine, like Danger Thunder Dragon, so Mystic Mine then became a viable tech card to play in the format. However, as the premier event season ended, no one truly got to experiment with the Jesse Cotton's Mystic Mine deck. Mystic Mine and Sky Striker, again, known quantity, but just not enough time to experiment, because as the July ban list rolled around, Metaverse got limited down to 1. That reduces the total copies of Mystic Mine in your deck from 11 to just 6, and arguably the best way to bring Mystic Mine out from your deck was Metaverse, because you can do it during your opponent's turn. So after the ban list, Mystic Mine decks would just get worse. Now they're more inconsistent in terms of their win condition, and so it doesn't really make sense to commit so many cards to a strategy that might not work and you can't resolve every single game. And so Mystic Mine would fade from competitive relevancy, and more so just be considered a gimmick. Enter Jeff Leonard.
So by Orlando, I was feeling really good. You know, we had been traveling to these events, and it had been really fantastic to see like a third-party infrastructure sort of develop around Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there aren't very many of those within Yu-Gi-Oh's history. You know, there's no like Star City games of Yu-Gi-Oh! The closest we get basically is ARG in 2015 and Pro Play Games in like 2019. So it's this burgeoning, incredible new tournament series that is attracting a lot of players, not only from like the areas where they would do events, but also dedicated PPG grinders. They had their own equivalent of a nationals season. So some people would come to every single event, and one of those people was Jeff Leonard. Jeff learned Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically as a way to hang out with his kid. But he was frustrated that combo decks existed, and there was so little he felt he could engage with. And so Jeff Leonard was like, well, forget it. I'm not even going to engage with that part of the game. I'm just going to play stun decks. And he functionally dedicated like months of his time to playing exactly Mystic Mine. And he got like really good at it.
Can we also just acknowledge the fact, too, that we've talked about this multiple times, but if you're just joining us here in the stream, Jeff is a father to another one of the competitors, and, you know, here he is.
This is his Solomon Moto moment.
Yeah, this is Grandpa Moto at its finest.
Have one draw step.
If Nicholas has a way to win this on the last turn that I am not aware, there's a Cyclone.
There's a Cyclone.
That's a Cyclone right there. Putting it on the bottom.
Jeff says, oh, you won't be drawing that card. It says, final countdown.
Oh my god, final countdown resolved its win condition. Jeff has just taken game number 1.
I'm losing my mind.
Oh,
this is incredible.
My god, Jeff is 1 win away from top 8.
If you're Jeff, do you think you shotgun a Cursed Seal if you have it on this engage?
If you have, honestly, I would. I feel like in the long term, it depends on what your other back row is. That's a Ray.
You fool!
He immediately flip that metaverse.
The second Ash Blossom. Oh, Jeff. He's talking about Prohibition real quickly. I'm sure it's naming a card that Nicholas isn't likely to send. And he'll
Jeff's
concede.
just
He
gonna
says
see.
there's no way.
That's just gonna be it. But you
Oh,
know
wow.
what? Wow. I mean,
Jeff Leonard would set the Yu-Gi-Oh community on fire. It wasn't that he was just winning with Mystic Mind Burn, but just how happy and what his demeanor was, what he represented to the game. He was good at his little stun deck and brought about the brand that anyone can play Yu-Gi-Oh. He understood the mechanics of his stun deck to a very high level, and he was a genuine threat in these tournaments.
Everyone knew he was on the deck and had the capacity to top. People were like bringing Cursed Seal of the Forbidden Spells in their like 2020 Magician Souls Spiral side decks at the Pro Play Games Invitational because they had to beat Jeff Leonard if they saw him in bracket.
No, Mystic Mind Burn was not good. That was still very much the case. It still required a little bit of luck to take you down to the finish line. But Jeff Leonard vastly increased the popularity of the deck. It went from being just a cancerous gimmick to people wanting to replicate the success of the most uninteractive deck in like the last 3 years. So for the next year, Mystic Mind would never truly see widespread play outside of its hermit crab shell of Mystic Mind Burn. Cauldron of the Old Man cooking, field barrier protecting, demise of the land fetching, Mystic Mind. So Mind Burn would see a little bit of competitive success here and there. It couldn't hang on to be like one of the best decks, but definitely could cheese a few wins over the course of a 9-round tournament. And so a ban list in January of 2020 would put an end to Yu-Gi-Oh's Eternal format. The 8-month-long tenure of 4 decks, Salamangreat, Orcus, Sky Striker, and Thunder Dragon, would be nuked to unplayability. But Mystic Mind as a card still couldn't find success even in a post-toss environment.
It had Eldritch and Adamancipator, and while Mystic Mind was good against Adamancipator, Eldritch just plays 3 Conquistador inherently. And like plus Adamancipator, if going first, you just set up so many negates and disruption that it didn't feel that great playing Mystic Mind when your opponent has all this interruption and not even good into half of the decks.
As we were all penned up in our households, forced to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Through the almighty webcam, Mystic Mind would again continue to undergo the vicious cycle. Prepare for it or don't. It wasn't like this card was a secret or anything, but people thought about it in this very black and white way. Will people prepare for it or not? And if people do prepare for it, therefore it is bad. And making the card theoretically worse alongside the list of decks that would be prepared for it is the availability of in-engine removal. One way Mystic Mind was used during the lockdown era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Was to play it in going second decks. The goal would be, again, to force out the majority of the negates from your opponent, and then drop a Mystic Mind on the field and hope to play, or even just OTK them through the Mind. So Mystic Mind going second could be this absolutely, comeback card to beat these full comboed out fields, just in the worst ways possible. As the year turned 2022 and we all emerged out from our homes, out into the real world to play some in-person Yu-Gi-Oh!, Mystic Mind would still find itself in the predicament. We kick off with Wysia Charlotte, Elijah Green taking the event with a souped-up Prank Kids deck. This is actually just about when I started to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Again. I had been a casual player from the years 2015 to 2020. I've been playing a pet deck at locals and being angry at meta players because, I couldn't get the deck. I had like a $100 anti-meta deck that I played for like 3 years. But I think I watched like an MBT video around this time, and I kind of gave the look, like the Green Goblin mask up onto the shelf to go ahead and bring back and play the game.
Oh shit, here we go again.
So just around this time, I'm giving the side eye to this to the deck box. So a predicament was going on overseas. Jonah Singer, Peter Mitros, and Po Jang were just a group of Australian Yu-Gi-Oh players. But stomping around in Australia, isolated from the rest of the Yu-Gi-Oh community, wasn't enough for them. And so YCS Hartford was the target here for the Australians. It'd be their first overseas YCS. Or would it?
Hello everyone, my name is Jonah, or online known as Jojo or Jojo ASMR. Initially, Po wasn't even going to go to the YCS. I just floated the idea amongst the three of us saying it'd be fun to travel internationally to play at one of these events. And during this time, Peter and I were doing really well with the Prank Kid Brave DPE deck. We were just really good with the deck, we were doing really well at regionals with it, and Po was just playing his little Sentuki, his little Sky Strikers in the corner, just having fun and taking it easy. And so originally Po was a bit lazy to go on the trip, in all honesty, but he saw that we were really enthusiastic, so he thought last minute he'll book his tickets and come along. So on the day of the trip, we're at the international terminal, Po, Peter and I. Peter and I get through customs no problem. But Po hasn't filled out his visa, he realized, or he filled it out incorrectly or something, and it takes up to 24 to 48 hours to get it approved when you submit it. So it's an hour before the flight, Po hasn't signed his visa, so we're getting called on the intercom, like, this is the final call for the flight, and we're sitting just at the international terminal waiting for our flight. And we're thinking there's no way Po is going to make it. And I have this video recording where we're sitting at this like lunch table, I suppose, and we found this like little tourist toy kangaroo that you get at one of those like tourist places, and we just sat it down next to us, like thinking this was Po. And then magically Po spawns like 1 minute before the plane takes off. And so that was pretty funny. But the worst part was that when we get on this 17-hour flight from Sydney to America, as the plane takes off, just before the internet cell goes out, the ban list drops. Peter and I are scrambling because Meow Moo has just been banned. The YCS, for context, is like less than 7 days away, and Po just sits there saying, "Oh, my deck's broken now."
After the May 2022 ban list, Prank Kids was no longer a playable deck. A strategy that made up a third of YCS Charlotte's top cut was now just, you couldn't play it. Alongside extra deck staples like Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon and Verte Anaconda also hitting the ban list, putting an end to random small commitment combo piles to add lots of recursion to these random decks.
And everyone was scrambling to try and solve the format, but it was most people were just going back to their comfort picks like Sword Soul, like Despia, as neither of those decks were touched. I'm trying to figure out what deck I'm going to play. Peter is also in the same boat, but he also has his Sky Striker cards just in case. And Po's just sitting there chilling, not even testing. He has his little Sentuki deck, his Sky Striker cards. And I'm talking with Peter, I'm trying to figure out like, what are we going to play? And I just remember one night when I was saying to Peter, okay, I'm going to sleep, and Peter was testing some ABC, Therion, Brave, Punk variant, and he says, I'm gonna test this deck all night long. And I see him start sleeving the cards up. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep. I wake up the next morning, I go to the living room. All of the ABC cards, all the Therion cards are just unsleeved, and he's just fully sleeved a Sky Striker deck.
So the one issue with this entire format is that it is completely monster focused.
Somehow people just forgot that Mystic Mine was unbanned.
Despia literally had no way to get rid of a Mystic Mine in their entire main deck. Sword Soul had Sword Soul Blackout, and that's a hope and a prayer. That's a one-of in the deck that needs more setup.
But furthermore, most of the combo decks that were siding 3 mines, most of them played mine as a counter to combo decks to deck them out, but how mine was abused in Sky Striker was completely different. And the most broken card as well being Demise of the Land. Activating 1 Demise of the Land into Mystic Mine, that's already 2 spells for engage. Like, we always just assumed there'd be 1 Cosmic Cyclone at least somewhere in the deck, post-side, and so you have to play eventually. So this idea that they were just like decking out people with Mystic Mine was not real.
Yes, the deck out can happen here or there, but if you just assume that you will deck your opponent out, and then suddenly your opponent has a copy of Cosmic Cyclone in their deck, you just lose. Taking those kind of risks is not how you're going to win a 15-plus round tournament. But yes, it does involve passing back and forth for just a little bit. So in YCS Hartford, Poe and Peter entered with the Format Destroyer. 3 Mystic Mine, Terraforming, a Metaverse, 3 copies of Demise of the Land, a weird field spell tech card that people don't really want to play. Oh, and it gets even worse. 3 copies of Trap Tricks and 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier. I changed my mind. This is a glorified stun deck. I mean, what makes this deck even crazier is the fact you're playing trap cards in 2022 in your main deck. Trap cards seen as the worst type of card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because they're just slow. But I guess if your trap cards are good enough and you can slow down the game enough, your trap cards become pretty good. So now Jesse Cotton's prototype from 3 years ago was going to change the course of Yu-Gi-Oh!
One there by Poe, really on the back of Mystic Mine, right? That is what his deck's built to do. We saw even when he was Stun 3, he even plays cards like Demise of the Land, right? To like support that further.
Oh, there's the card drawn was Ray. Yep, the judge is clarifying the position for everyone here. Token Collector was activated, token onto the summon of the Hornet Drones, removing the Hornet Drones from the field. Ray is then normal summon, going to be able to link summon Strike Striker Ace Kagari. Yeah, this Engage is going to draw a card, and I think likely he's going to go after that Access Code Talker, making it back to 2300, or just getting the Ray back. Those. Oh yeah, he's going to send it to gain 1,000, and then that is enough. Poe is going to move on into top 4.
Incredible game. Incredible. Yeah. That was one of the best games I've seen so far today. That was super.
Yeah. So he declares Fusion Monsters here, and that's going to negate the effect of Lebellion.
See it in his face. You can see it.
And that's it.
Minutes away from missing a flight to winning a YCS halfway around the world. However, Poe and Peter were not the only people to find out that Mystic Mine was a really good card this format.
Mine at this point, and at that point on, was no longer a card to deck people out. If your deck inherently played field spells already, it gave you another tool to help you slow down the pace of the game and just give you more ways to come back possibly.
There were other decks that cropped up in Top Cut that also had Mystic Mine in their deck list. A couple of Fluanderies lists and combo piles would also consider playing the card. And a lot of people, and I'll say, a lot of people, saw just how good it was. Welcome to the North American World Championship qualifier. Look, I know it wouldn't take a lot of effort to edit another one of these, but nah. Going into the NAWCQ, it was an exceptionally diverse 20 deck format, and it all devolved into a Mystic Mine minigame. Nearly every top level player had a copy of Mystic Mine in their deck. It didn't matter if you're playing Sky Striker anymore, Mystic Mine was just a good card. And that is even when people were considering preparing against the card. Why was Mystic Mine good? I thought if people prepared for the card, it was a lot worse. And so while we are in a very monster heavy format, Mystic Mine just does ask your opponent the question, do you have a Cosmic Cyclone? If not, a player is able to come back into the game, recoup the card advantage, and break the Mystic Mine when they feel like it. It didn't matter if you prepared for it. You had to draw one of your unsearchable outs.
And it's like people just don't like Mystic Mine because it's not fun, and that part is true. The game is better off without Mystic Mine, even if it could be healthy in some formats. It's just not fun. The games that it exists aren't fun. They're not good for viewers. They're not good for players. So it shouldn't exist because of that reason.
Like, yes, there is skill involved. Like, you can't go to try and deck everyone out. But just the feeling of staring at your opponent and saying pass for 10 turns straight and then getting killed with your opponent having 7 cards in hand to break your empty board. That feels pretty bad. So Hansel Aguero would win the North American World Championship qualifier with Sword Soul. 3 copies of Mystic Mine in the main. There would be a short break in the action until the EUWCQ just a month later. The Yu-Gi-Oh community had a month to think about whether they wanted to play Mystic Mine. Nah, I'm not going to edit another one of these. At the EUWCQ, it was exactly the same. Mystic Mine was now the best board breaker in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! It had evolved out of its shell of being this gimmicky win condition and now could be played in any deck. It's a way to get yourself established versus your opponent's monster-focused field. When it's activated, all of a sudden it becomes a scramble to try and clear your entire field of monsters so that Mystic Mine destroys itself, or you draw a Cosmic Cyclone, or you get decked out. Mystic Mine sucks. And now it was the worst, best tool in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it epitomized the summer of 2022. But that's not even the worst part about Mystic Mine. 1 week after the EUWCQ, the defining chapter of Mystic Mine is about to begin.
So since COVID had happened, I was getting told I was washed because I hadn't topped any events. I kind of bubbled like Charlotte because I lost because of the clock on the bubble on a future match. And then I hadn't topped it all since COVID. It can be a bit discouraging. Summer, I wasn't testing much for the event. And I really wanted to go to Brazil. And I was about to play Eldritch because I'm like, whatever. I just didn't care. And I showed up and left my deck at home. And I'm like, okay, well, what else am I playing now? And then I saw what went on at Euros and the innovations. I saw like Herman Hansen or whatever's Danger Tier deck. And then I knew Mystic Mine is very popular. So I put Mystic Mine outs in my deck. And once I knew I was playing Tier, which was literally a day before the event, I spent a couple hours kind of in my head theorizing all the problems. And they were entirely hypothetical. It was on 0 testing. So I had to theorize the potential problems of the deck and hope I was right. And I turned out to be right, thankfully. But I was also going based off of what I'd seen the previous weekend at the WCQ. So my theory had a base point. So yeah, Mystic Mine was something I wanted to make sure I was prepared for. And then I ended up having 2 searchable outs to Eradicator. I mean, 2 searchable outs to Mystic Mine in my deck. And I think it was super easy to prepare for. It really wasn't that much of a deck building like downside, and they had applications outside of Mystic Mine, but I mean, Mystic Mine really wasn't ever going to beat me at that event.
So Jesse might have been prepared, but nobody else was. João Paulo Lima showed up to YCS Rio and won with Mystic Mine Burn. The total cost of his deck at the time was like $100. His extra deck was filled with useless meme monsters that he was never gonna use anyways. His main deck, 0 monster cards. In one of Yu-Gi-Oh's highest power formats ever of Tier Limits and Sprite. This was probably the most ridiculous YCS win ever. Afterwards, the clamoring couldn't be louder. However, competitively speaking, Mystic Mine would cool off after the raging summer. At the time when playing, it almost felt like a handshake between both duelists rather than a format consensus that the card was bad. Cosmic Cyclone would be found in every deck list, and slowly but surely, Tier Limits climbed the ranks to become one of the best decks. In between, Mystic Mine would even dodge a banlet, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Kept chugging along. The theme of having in-archetype removal for the card in Tier Limit's Heartbeat, also more so pushing Mystic Mine away from extreme relevancy. It saw play in the fall, but far less than usual. But it was also on everyone's mind when deck building. There's a certain psychological element to losing to this card. Moving on into YCS Pasadena ushered in one of the most high power and skill intensive format in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Now, I made a video on it a while back, and safe to say, I think I've gotten better at this video essay making thing. But anyways, hey, nearly the same group of Brits from my last video, the Disciples, rocked up with Mystic Mine and Tier Limits, and had an incredibly good conversion rate.
So everyone knew they was the best deck, but no one had anything to copy. So you saw people just making deck building mistakes. And I think the reason we did it is that we streamlined deck building and we understood what were the win conditions of the mirror. Because at the end of the day, the one matchup that mattered was the mirror. And we realized that Mystic Mine was the best way to win the mirror. That's what we did.
Thankfully, not everyone caught on to that. But in general, versus even the highest powered deck of the format, Mystic Mine wasn't good because of the tier limits field spell, Primeval Planet Perla Rhino. This didn't stop the wider Yu-Gi-Oh community from hating the card. Mystic Mine as a card promoted the most toxic and unfun gameplay Yu-Gi-Oh may have ever seen. Mystic Mine was such a unique card because over the course of its existence, it turned from a gimmicky win condition into the meta-defining staple that was played in every deck, no matter how truly good it was. Like, people knew that this card was just awful, horrible, terrible, just anti-Yu-Gi-Oh! But people couldn't imagine it taking over the game in the way that it did. It had to go.
We're gonna keep moving on. Mystic Mine is back!
Oh my god, and beautiful right out of the starting gate. These.
Why they gotta ban my favorite card, bro?
Little people mourn the death of Mystic Mine. It won a YCS. It created one of the most good but toxic formats ever to play in during the NAWCQ. And it was a card that had great intentions, but terrifying execution. But one thing that it did do was define Yu-Gi-Oh! Thanks for watching. Before we wrap this up, a quick shout out to the Patreon. For those who want to get more Yu-Gi-Oh! Insights, all the interviews done for this video will be posted in full, unedited down there. Whether you want to hear Jesse Cotton's experiences with Mystic Mine and his competitive mindset, the full story of YCS Hartford, or Jeff Leonard's competitive journey, you can check out my Patreon with all those full-length interviews there. I also want to shout out Blade YGO for giving me a massive wealth of information that kind of made this video completely possible. Come back into Yu-Gi-Tubing, buddy. And last but not least, shoutouts to Zachary Jones, Greek Eyes for Strict, and Michael Morales. Thanks for joining the bubble, folks, and maybe we'll make another tier to Top Cut. See you then. On that note, folks, peace.